Hello everyone, welcome to an absolutely fantastic day today in the clown decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And if you want to keep up to date with all things clown decade, please do subscribe to the channel and of course become a member. Right, we're just going to get into the feel-good story today, and I will bring everyone back down to earth, but let's celebrate where we can. How Reform would crush all before them if election was held tomorrow. Explosive megapoll shows Nigel Farage set for the biggest Commons majority ever, with the Tories reduced to just 7 MPs and Labour ministers culled. Now, this is an excellent headline to see. This is going to be seen by literally millions of people all over Britain. The Daily Mail, I believe, is the most read newspaper in the United Kingdom, I think mostly because of its gossip columns, to be fair. So yeah, that is absolutely a headline that you are going to want, especially in the Daily Mail of all papers. So Reform is on course to win 445 seats, with Labour down to 73 MPs if an election was held tomorrow. But, and this is where reality has to set in, tactical voting could block Mr Farage's path to victory, with more than a third of Labour voters saying they would back the Tories to stop Reform. Uniparty moment right there. The seat-by-seat MRP poll, shared exclusively with the Daily Mail, was carried out by communications firm PLMR with electoral calculus. MRP, multi-level regression and post-satisfaction, is widely seen as a more accurate way to predict how many seats each party will win. I mean, that's the other thing. This is an MRP poll. That's kind of the creme de la creme, if you will, of polling. Out of all polling, it's typically the most accurate and the best screenshot of how people are feeling in the country at the moment, which, yeah, kind of damages the egos of many in Labour and the Tories, and is absolutely feeding into mine. It's forecast the Lib Dems were on course to win 42 seats, with SNP set 41 and Corbyn's Your Party on 13, which is actually quite surprising because Your Party seems to have, well, it had a bit of a hiccup, but they seem to be back on course despite Zora Sultana lashing out, saying, well, I'm going to sue everyone, and then deciding best not to, despite the fact that a lot of people have now switched from them to the Greens because Zach Polanski is calling everyone a fascist. The Tories came in 6th place with just 7 MPs. So Jeremy Corbyn is beating the Tories finally. It only took Reform to absolutely decimate everyone to get to that point. Narrowly ahead of the Greens on 6 and Plaid on 5, which is really is very funny actually. Greens have not done particularly well then, but this might be explained here. The poll is of 7,449 British adults and took place from September 10 to 18 before the party conference season. So that could explain it. Zach Polanski really did have the bounce in membership post the Your Party fallout, and obviously their own conference as well, where they said they were going to basically ban landlords. This poll was done before that, so basically expect the 50 or so seats going between all the minor parties to switch about a bit. You might end up with Greens on 13 rather than Corbyn. But either way, this is still an excellent snapshot, and even post-party conference season, from other polls we've seen, there's basically been no bounce back for Labour, nor has there been any for the Tories, despite the fact that on Twitter you'd think that the Tories were having a bit of rejuvenation with all the people whose entire social life relies on being a Tory. So this is the bar chart with the number of seats. As you can see, Reform just massively all the way up. We're talking about a majority of 240. I mean, that's effectively a one-party state. But again, I want you to bear in mind that this is very unlikely to happen, and while I'll let you bask in this for another 10 seconds or so, we really need to go into why we can't rest on our laurels, because at the end of the day, this is only really happening because of local campaigning. And you know what the branches need? They need you, yes, the person listening to this, to join Reform and campaign for them. Honestly, door knocking and passing in leaflets, it's easy, and you know, safety in numbers. Only really if you're alone where you have a bad time. You tend to be left alone when you're in groups of 3, which is typically how I've done it. But yeah, as I say, they need you to go and knock on doors, especially younger people, because it's mostly the boomers doing it now, and you wonder why the triple lock's been in place for so many years. So now we move on to the map, and it's basically just a sea of blue with the odd Tory win, mostly in Scotland, oddly enough, that is very odd, and with a couple in the Shires, with the rest of the Shires pretty much being taken up by the Lib Dem vote. Labour are pretty much annihilated outside of London and some other major cities such as Liverpool and even Cardiff. SNP obviously have a large cohort in Scotland, fighting mainly the Lib Dems, but even Reform have some seats up in Scotland, which again, quite a surprise. Wales is just Reform land, Northern England is just Reform land. It's about the best thing that you could expect. However, for those of you with an eagle eye, this is the predictive winner with no tactical voting. And this is what we look like with tactical voting. You can see, certainly around cities, there are a few more votes going to Labour and the Tories pick up way more than 7 seats. This damages Reform's biggest majority ever, in terms of any party winning a majority, but as usual, it is still an incredibly good result. And with tactical voting, it looks like the Tories are not going to be beat out by Jeremy Corbyn, though if that does end up happening, that will literally be the funniest thing ever. So as I say, don't rest on your laurels, do get out there, do get campaigning, do spread the word. We've got 250,000 members, but you know, we could have that all the way up to 500,000, you never know. It would be one hell of a middle finger to the past century of complete and utter political failure, apart from the odd blip with Margaret Thatcher. This poll, however, also asked people what the biggest issue facing them is. This is actually one of the rare ones these days where the cost of living is higher than immigration, though still both are rather high. The NHS, given it's a state religion, obviously massive, although it is in dire straits. Policing and all that, that's fourth. That's one of Reform's other big policy areas that they've been looking into at the moment, and then it's social care, climate change, and the environment, that is. Cutting taxes is lower than it should be. Don't know. A lot of people say 12%. People don't care about education, even though it's dire at the moment. Public health and illness prevention. I mean, it's crazy that's not higher, given that we're only 4 years past COVID. Reducing the budget deficit, that should be way higher. And then other. Basically, you sort out immigration, and a lot of those big ones do actually sort themselves out, so there you go. The Daily Mail goes on to say, this will be a difficult read for many senior parliamentarians, with Reform set to scalp a number of senior Labour and Conservative figures. Chancellor Rachel Reeves, Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson and Energy Secretary Ed Miliband could all be ousted by Reform, and wouldn't that be just a wonderful day? I mean, hell, the last stream I did where it was just pure depression for pretty much 10 hours with the odd, oh, Nigel Farage got elected. Yeah, that's going to be completely different. Now it's going to be, yeah, Farage got elected, we knew that. Oh my God, we have the 300th elected Reform MP. This is going to be great. Shabana Mahmood and Wes Streeting could lose their seat to your party, the polling indicated. That's also hilarious. Tory party leader Kemi Badenoch could also be scalped by Reform, the poll found, along with Jenrick, Braverman, Sunak and Ian Duncan Smith. Just that is a complete and utter devastation of big Tory party names. I wonder if Katie Lamb survives, actually. With the country unlikely to go to the polls for another 3 years, the polling also found that the economy and cost of living are top priority for voters who want action this autumn, which is also incredibly funny because within Westminster the talk is always, oh, Reform aren't serious on the economy, what do they expect to do? You can't run an economy without immigration. That's what Boris Johnson found out and told everyone on the Daily Telegraph. And this polling is just showing, even with the cost of living at the highest, Reform are basically still trusted to, at the very least, not make it worse, I suppose. Anyway, commentary from the CEO of PLMR said, this poll shows a remarkable fall from grace for the Tory party and exposes where voters' priorities lie. The electorate is demanding action on the economy first and foremost, with concerns around immigration and the NHS still present, and traditional party loyalties are under unprecedented pressure. However, there is a long way to go to 2029 and the message is very clear. Voters want the weekly shop to cost less, and it's time to forget the slogans and the clever language. Instead, the government must keep calm and focus on delivering more money into working people's pockets to shore up support ahead of the next election. Anyway, it's just come out today that Rachel Reeves has confirmed there's going to be tax rises, so good luck with that. The Daily Mail also has a list of the Labour cabinet who are going to be losing their seats to various parties. As you can see, most go to Reform, with just Wes Streeting and Yvette Cooper going to your party. Ed Miliband to Reform, win. Liz Kendall to Reform, win. Rachel Reeves to Reform, absolutely huge. Shabana Mahmood's apparently going to Reform there. I think they reported that she was going to your party beforehand, but, well, it doesn't really matter. She's losing her seat. That's good to see. Funnily enough, they didn't have one for the Tory party because who cares about them these days? Martin Baxter, founder of Electoral Calculus, added, the poll underscores just how volatile the political landscape has become. The two big changes at the moment, but they point in different directions. Anti-reform tactical voting means Reform's poll lead isn't as good as it looks, as the party could lose dozens of seats because many voters will vote for any candidate without a light blue rosette, and yes, that could be a problem. That means you need to go out, Reform activists, and get the people that think they should vote Reform to actually go out and vote, because people can rest on their laurels and that can absolutely kneecap your chance of a win. However, the emergence of your party further fragments the left of centre vote and makes things easier for Reform and harder for Labour. Ahead of the autumn budget coming in November, voters are making their priorities clear. Place the economy, migration and the NHS at the top of the agenda. Labour now faces a fight for votes, and their ability to act decisively and deliver on these priorities will determine whether the party can defend its leadership or risk falling further behind as Reform seeks to solidify its gains, which it's doing very well and will be solidified next May in Wales especially, but for other local elections. Personally, I can't wait. Naturally, this led to celebrations from the Reform HQ, lots with Z Yusuf at the top saying, "There's a new MRP poll by the Daily Mail and it puts Reform on 445 seats, the biggest majority ever. The Tories down to 7 seats. Obviously, that's with the non-tactical voting poll, but hey, it's not technically misinformation. Kemi would lose her seat, as would Jenrick, Sunak and Braverman. Reeves, Cooper, Phillipson and Miliband, Mahmood and Streeting would all lose theirs." And there's also a graphic being posted to just show how overwhelmingly large this poll is. Again, this is without tactical voting, so it's a little sneaky, but you know what? I'll take it. It's the absolute best news story that you could have post-conference season, even though it was a poll done before conference season. But again, what type of people are going to be looking at the details of that, huh? All that really matters here is that Reform are overwhelmingly popular and it's okay to vote for them. That's kind of the point of this story, and that's why a lot of people are very happy. Lee Anderson made his own post too. The megapoll is by the company PLMR with electoral calculus and published by the Daily Mail overnight. It would see Reform win an awful lot of seats, we've gone through all that detail, and it projects Reform would return an earth-shattering majority of 258, that's even more than I thought it would be, which is more than the bold win in 1924. Along with YouGov, it kills dead the Kemi Bounce narrative. Not quite, this was done obviously before the Kemi Bounce narrative even began. It was before conference season, so can't quite say that. However, the Kemi Bounce narrative is absolutely dead in the water, but I'll go into why in a sec. In fact, she loses her seat, Reform UK on 34%, Conservative on 25% in this poll. And with tactical voting, I don't think it will be much better. That is just a seat that is gone. Rachel Reeves, Yvette Cooper, Bridget Phillipson and Ed Miliband would all be ousted by Reform. Jenrick, Braverman, Sunak and Ian Duncan-Smith would all lose their seats too, Lee Anderson's former colleagues. Shabam Mahmood and Wes Streeting would lose their seats to your party. Again, when you looked at the graphic, that was actually Yvette Cooper rather than Shabam Mahmood, but whatever. The poll of 7,499 British adults took place from September 10 to 18 before the party conference season, so I don't know how he puts that in the same tweet as the Kemi Bounce narrative is dead, but either way, the Kemi Bounce narrative is dead, but that's inaccuracy on Lee Anderson's social media guy's part. Anyway, just to bring us down to earth even more, we do really need to look at the average polling because, well, that's the one that really matters. You can have mega polls telling you that the Reform Party are going to win the stars and moon for all I care. The average is what really brings it back down to earth, and Wikipedia have a very good chart of it. And to be honest with you, even from this chart, this is far better than anyone could have expected back in 2024, just after the election. And these are averages post the Kemi Bounce, and as you can see, Tories are still going down. Okay, give it a couple of weeks, fair enough, but I just can't see them ever getting above 20% again. I don't see why they wouldn't keep going down. Their one announcement that everyone lost their mind over for some reason was stamp duty, which one is already a Reform policy anyway, and frankly a less good version of it because it only applies to first homes, whatever that might mean. And barely anything on immigration. They've been forced to finally say they'll leave the ECHR, as Reform have said for over a year anyway. This is the problem. The only way that either Labour or Tories can recover in any way is effectively to emulate Reform, but then nobody takes it seriously because obviously both had 14 years to try that. And we knew from 2016 that's what people wanted. It was put toward Boris Johnson, actually, that the only reason people are really voting Reform is because Boris Johnson didn't deliver what he promised. Reform are largely promising the same things. This is the thing that always gets me. We're not at a point on the right wing of having to convince people which direction to go. They're clearly already voting that way. I mean, if you want to move the Overton window even further this time, it's pointless. Can we at least try and get to the first step of fixing the major problems we have in Britain before we start trying to say, you know what, I want more brown people deported, which, by the way, I obviously would oppose. And I think most British people would oppose deportations based on skin colour. But that's pretty much the only direction for that side of the argument to go. But, well, we're at a point where basically everyone's just admitted that reform is the only way forward anyway. Even the people who've joined Advanced are now, I think, starting to see that there are cracks in the whole plan here. Because you keep seeing polls like this and you think, how's Ben Habib going to compete with that? Where's Advance on this scorecard? Absolutely nowhere. They're not even a party yet. And when they do become a party, I highly doubt they're going to even reach 1% within the year. But, well, with how mad politics is at the moment, I suppose you never know. Anyway, I'll finish this bit off by pointing out to the Tories that your party is dead and basically the writing is on the wall that it's going to die a death and basically be a semi-regional party. Mike Graham of Talk TV wrote that the Tory party needs to be put on life support, and it's not an exaggeration to say that the movement that produced Churchill and Thatcher is at its lowest point in history, and I just can't see any route to recovery. Post-conference, basically everyone's comments are, yeah, the Tories are still doing pretty terribly, and Kemi's probably going to last till May. You know, at least she survived the incoming regicide by a few months. And at that point, why would people take you seriously? I mean, you know, Robert Jenrick, is he going to be your saviour? The man who oversaw the Boris wave? The man who was proud to be opening all of these hotels everyone's complaining about? The man who kept hidden from you that they were bringing over 100,000 Afghans in secret? Yeah, I don't think so. Part of the blob, part of the problem. He should not be joining Reform either. Because Mike Graham just says what I've been saying for some time. Another opportunity to confirm that not many people care what the Tories have to say and still fewer care what they think. Which is what I've been saying for a while. I mean, it's always been said by a lot of Tory simps of, oh, they say they don't care about us, but they keep talking about us. Well, yeah, you were in power for 14 years, but we're at a point beyond vindictiveness and we just have complete apathy. I mean, why do I talk about them? Because it's my hobby. But realistically, when I'm talking to normies these days, it's all about Labour and Reform. People kind of just don't care about the Tories at this point, and I think a lot of people I know are quite left-wing, are just happy that the Tories have gone. They probably prefer them to Reform, bear in mind, but even then, they might vote for them tactically, and that's about it. Now, when you have Jacob Rees-Mogg's family joining Reform, and you have Jacob Rees-Mogg himself saying in one of his videos, Tories need to swallow their pride and vote for Reform in Caerphilly, at that point, how is that not Jacob Rees-Mogg basically saying, yeah, the Tories are dead? Jacob Rees-Mogg knows that. Jacob Rees-Mogg just can't bring himself to join Reform, because at the end of the day, the Tory party is just a social club and little more at this point. But they still want some power to still excuse themselves having extravagant dinners, like they just had at Margaret Thatcher's centennial. Which, of all people, you had Boris Johnson making a speech at, which is just ridiculous to me. I reckon Margaret Thatcher would have hated what he did. But anyway, the Tory party was born in 1912 when the older Conservative Party merged with the Liberal Unionist Party to form one of the biggest and most influential political movements in the world. But it is not an exaggeration to say that it is currently at the lowest point in its entire history. When former Tory Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries defected to Reform in September, she declared the Tory party dead. Danny Kruger, former chief speechwriter to Cameron and political secretary to Prime Minister Johnson, was next to move to Reform, and he was perhaps a bigger fish to catch for Nigel Farage and more damaging loss for the Tories. But Kruger said his former party was rightly and naturally punished for its record, for failing to control our borders. The Tories, he argued, got it wrong on mass migration and reducing tax. Absolutely. We voted Tories and we got Labour of 2017. That's all that happened. That's literally a Corbyn government, by the way. So after explaining how the conference in Manchester for the Tories was actually a dismal affair, with many journalists, now that they've recovered from their hangover, said that overall it was quite depressing and empty. Reform's shindig in Birmingham was positively non-political and was basically there for the ordinary people expressing a genuine desire for change and direction of Britain. Many of the 260,000 members of Reform are Tory voters who will never vote for the Tory party again. Hey, that's me. That message comes through loud and clear on every talk show that I do from our listeners and viewers. And yet Tory MPs and some former spin doctors seem convinced that the party can recover. Most shadow ministers will tell me quite gleefully that voters will come back and that their new ideas are proving popular on the doorstep of the nation. What, stamp duty and doubling apprenticeships? I don't even know anyone who ever did an apprenticeship. In fact, no, I know one person and he hated it. Apprenticeships are basically there for very cheap labour, and it's very much not worth the apprentice's time, because the way we basically do it is say, oh, you'll get a qualification after this, and they're basically paid a pittance. So nobody goes for it because they can just work at Tesco for minimum wage, which is £5 more or something at this point. Nothing could be further from the truth, though. The Conservatives suffered a landslide defeat in July last year, ending up with just 121 seats from an original majority of 80 in the last Parliament. It looked like they will suffer an even worse rout at the hands of Reform in the local elections next May, and they already suffered one last May. They still seem fixated on the ways of old. Thatcher's ghost seems to haunt them still. They even exhibited some of her outfits in Manchester, where they had to draw a curtain across half the exhibition hall to make it look more crowded. It's just been a disaster. It's been a total and utter disaster. Stride's big set piece to talk about the dour state of Rachel Reeves' economy. There were so many empty seats it looked like an unpopular fringe event with no free wine. It doesn't mention the Badenoch speech was full, but that's because basically you have to be there, because nothing else is happening during the leader's speech. Even the resurrection of Johnson for a book tour recently didn't interest those voters who used to love him but now regard him as a failure and a traitor to the cause. And with every week that passes, more and more former government ministers attempt to prove the mistakes under Boris, Rishi and Truss were nothing to do with them. If delusion was a currency they could cash in for victory, there might be some hope for the modern Conservative Party, but it's time for people who care about it to start administering life support before it's too late. In other words, focus way more on being a regional party than a national one. You have a couple of seats in Scotland, maybe. You've been dead in Wales for years. And I suppose this is a message to all the Tory voters and members who still watch me. It's over. It's completely over. Unless you live in an area that is very Tory and has a very good branch, there's basically no reason not to join Reform at this point. At first it was, oh, they're not going to do mass deportations, as if Tories are ever going to do that. Well, they're doing that now. And then it was, oh, they're not serious on the economy. Well, they've just had to completely rejig their whole economic policy. Well, it's going to be announced either next week or next month, I don't remember. So they're clearly getting serious on the economy, and I'm with you. You need to cut spending and then get the budget balanced before you can start cutting the tax. And all I'll leave it on is this, and to be honest, this does apply to the current Tory sitting MPs as well. Those of you that are leaving the defection till later, you just look more and more and more cynical. The correct time to join the Tory party was a year ago. The second correct time is as soon as possible. A year ago is really hyperbolic. I mean, nobody expected Reform to do as well as they have been doing. Danny Kruger is still the first of many. I would imagine that Reform have quite a few on a waiting list, and they are going to drip feed that more and more are coming over as time goes on. It's good political comms. You need to do it when there are big announcements going on to get all the attention on you again. And they saw the Tory conference as the time to do it at the council level. That's kind of how much they're actually taunting the Tories at the moment. Your big conference that's supposed to be going really well, we only deem it worthy of 20 council defections, no MPs. And there are absolutely MPs that want to join Reform. As far as I'm aware from insider knowledge, there's 18 that have been rejected. That implies to me that there are more who are coming down the line. So we will see. So with that, that is the feel-good video for the day. If you enjoy what I do and obviously want to keep up with the Clown Decade, do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. Great ways to help out the channel. You can also become a channel member and, of course, leave super chats and super thanks in any video that I do. Right, in terms of shilling, tonight we are playing some more Life is Strange, so we get to laugh at millennial writing that still somehow exists. Wolves of Westminster podcast should be out Friday, and of course on Saturday we've got Laughing at the Guardian with some whamming. So that's your fill for this week. So with that, thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.